Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Thanks for joining me today. So this is my first video of the new year. So happy new year. I hope you had a great Christmas. And yeah, let's get started again with the videos. So a little explanation on why I have been absent the past month or so. I've had quite bad tonsillitis. My tonsils are so large that I can't speak that well, so I lost my voice for about 1 week. I lost it completely and now it's back, but I'm still not completely healed up. So I did have some blood tests done and it might be glandular fever, but I'm not sure yet. So let's see, I really hope that it's not that and it's just a throat infection, but we'll see. So I do have to spare my voice a little bit, which means that I won't be able to do too many videos. I will focus on tutorials on Patreon mostly in the upcoming weeks. So I might be a little bit absent here on YouTube, but I really hope my voice will heal up in the upcoming weeks. So in this video, I'm showing you the process of drawing cat eyes and a little bit of fur with pastels. So this was a Patreon tutorial, so you can find the real-time process on there. When I recorded this one, I still had my voice, so I sound normal there. And actually, I have the same drawing in colored pencil available on Patreon. So I did the same drawing, both in pastels and in colored pencils, so you can see the difference in techniques. In this video, I will talk you through the process. My voice might sound a little bit weak, so I hope you don't mind. And also my nose is clogged up, so I really don't sound my best. So actually I started out with a really light graphite sketch. I'm working on pastel matte. This is dark gray pastel matte. And I had a very light graphite sketch put down already. But it's so light that you can't really see it. Graphite won't really work well with pastels, so I make sure to have the sketch super light. And then I can easily go on top with the darker pastel colors. So I start off with the left eye. I work from left to right. You can see the image in the top right corner. And I start out with outlining the eye. So I do that with a very dark blue, not with black, because that will look flat. So I start out with a dark blue. And I make sure to keep the lines pretty thin. So I make sure to have the points really sharp. I use very regular sharpeners for that. Usually those from Faber-Castell. I like the color grip, but I basically like all sharpeners from Faber-Castell. As long as they are new. So as soon as they get dull, you have to get a new one. Otherwise the points will break. And then I start out with some base layers in the eye. So I start out with mapping out the highlights in the eye, not with white but with gray. The highlight is never completely white, so I start out with gray, then I can always lighten it up later if it's necessary. And for the base layer in the iris, I use a combination of blue and gray. So for gray, I use cool gray. And I use gray to make sure that the color will not get too blue. If I had used only blue, it might have gotten too vibrant. And you can see in the reference that the eye is blue, but not super extremely blue. So that's why I put in some cool gray as well. I wouldn't use warm gray because warm gray has a yellow tone to it that will look very weird with blue, so that's why I use cool gray. Cool gray has a blue hue to it. And then to start out with the pupil, I map it out with dark blue first, so no black yet. First dark blue. You can always find multiple colors in the pupil, it's never completely black. So I fill that in with blue first, make sure that the shape is correct. And then later on I can always darken it up with black. And I also work on the highlight a little bit more. I'm now mainly drawing around it with the darker colors. And then the base layer in the eye is basically finished. So then I can go back in with the details. So in the eye I could also find some green. So I added some darker greens, especially in the top half of the eye, as it's more dark. It's darker than the bottom half. For the shadow tones, I'm using mainly dark blues and greens to keep the eye nice and vibrant. I wouldn't use browns for this. So after filling in the base layers, you can see that the outline around the eye is actually a little bit too light. So now I can go back in with black and darken up that outline, but very thin. So I make sure to keep the pencil very sharp. For brands of pencils, I use Faber-Castell Pitt and Stabilo Carbothello. And after that, I also darken up the pupil. You can see that it really gives the eye a lot more character to it. So you do have to make sure that the pupil is very dark, but I always put in more color than only black. I always put in blue and a bit of purple. Alright, so in the highlight you can always find more color. You can see the reflecting colors of the environment in the highlight. So I added blue to the highlight. And you can actually see the lashes in the highlight as well. So with the darker color, I added a little bit of lines, the lashes in the highlight. Not too much, but just a little bit, and that really helps with the realism. And then for the details in the eye, I added some of the veins with darker blues, and to create the glassy effect, I make sure to add some lighter tones in the bottom half of the eye especially. The bottom half of the eye is going to catch the most light. The top half will be overshadowed by the top eyelid. And then when I decided that the eye was finished, I moved on with the fur on the left side of the face. So in the fur you can see a mix between cool tones and warm tones. So I started off with mixing both of those in the base layer. So I started off with warm gray and cool gray. And I started off with quite a dark base layer. Then on top of that I can add the lighter hairs. So always make sure to draw in the right direction of the fur growth. So you're going around the eye and then outwards, both on the top half and the bottom half. And then after adding the base layer, I start adding some lighter hairs, mainly with the warm gray now. My pressure is pretty low throughout the whole process because I want to make sure that I can adjust things if it's necessary. If you push too hard right away, the paper will fill up too soon. So then you won't be able to add that much detail anymore. For the lighter hairs in the face, I make sure to not go too tidy with my strokes. I make sure that the hairs overlap a little bit. That will give it a more realistic effect, because every hair is different. And then to create some more depth in the fur, I go in between the hairs with the darker gray. I'm so sorry for my voice. I hope it's not too annoying to listen to, but when I hear myself talk right now, I sound so different from what I usually do. Alright, so then it was time to move on to the right eye. And I basically use exactly the same techniques for this, starting off with outlining the eye with dark blue. So this eye is a little bit darker than the left one. This one is more in shadow. So I start off with a little bit of a darker base layer right away. And I also saw more green in it, so I add a lot more green. So starting off with the base layer of green, blue and gray, drawing around the highlight. And then slowly darkening up the pupil and the eyelids. I don't do too much blending with my finger, by the way. I let the pencils do the blending work, just by adding lots of layers in circular motions. I make sure to use as many different types of blues and greens as I can in the eyes to make it really interesting. For the lighter tones in the eye, I don't use white, I use light gray from Faber-Castell. Faber-Castell Pit has a really nice light gray. So then after finishing this eye, it was time to move on with the rest of the fur. For the eyelids, by the way, you can see the bottom eyelid very well on both eyes. I fill that in with a bit of purple, so dark purple, and a bit of brown. So again, start off with the base layer in the fur, warm gray, for this drawing I basically used every single gray from Stabilo, both the warm tones and the cool tones. On Patreon you can find the whole real-time process with narration and also the color list, of course. So to make the fur a little bit more interesting, I added some pink to it. It's not really pink, it's more of a fleshy tone. That gave the fur a lot more depth. And then I started adding the lighter hairs on top of the dark base layer using warm gray. For the lightest hairs, I use a light beige. So a very light color with a yellow tone to it. And then the bridge of the nose, that's usually a little bit tricky in cats because you have multiple changes of direction in the fur. So you have a direction change in between the eyes, where the fur goes from up to down towards the nose, and you have a change of direction on both sides of the bridge of the nose. So always make sure to keep that in mind when you're drawing cats. So I'm starting out with the dark base layer again, then adding the lighter hairs on top. So when adding those hairs, I really keep those fur changes in mind. So on the reference you can see that the bridge of the nose is super light. It catches a lot of light. I toned that down a little bit in my drawing because I wanted to make that a little bit more soft. Then for the inner corners of the eyes, I use purple and blue. So on the right eye, there was a little bit of wet stuff in the inner corner of the eye, so I added that as well, using a base layer of blue first. And then with light gray, I added those shiny parts. And then it was time for the final details, adding some more darkness in between the hairs here and there. And in the end I was quite happy with the results. So this drawing took about, I'm not sure anymore, 2.5 hours to make, something like that. Of course you're free to do this drawing as well. It's over on my Patreon. Your support is very, very much appreciated. Adding a tiny bit of black in between the eyes, where it's the darkest. So in this drawing I tried to stay away from black and white as much as possible. I only added a bit of white in the left eye, in the highlight, and a bit of black around the eyes and in the pupil, but the rest I tried to do with the colors. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Again, Happy New Year. I hope you'll have a good one. And I'm so sorry for my voice. I hope you don't mind. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this video. And if you want to see the one in colored pencil as well, let me know in the comments below. Maybe I can upload that one as well. And then I want to wish you a very nice day and thanks for watching. Bye guys!